Welcome to the Silver and Mature WomanPreneur Podcast, a podcast for and by women over 50, providing faith-building strategies for female entrepreneurs looking to achieve higher levels of productivity, capacity, and growth, where we strive to focus on God's agenda while building our businesses to serve our community with excellence. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me here. It's my pleasure. It's my honor, really. And I was so excited when you asked me. And obviously, we have known each other a whole long time. And it's just my privilege to be here. And I'm really grateful for the ministry. I knew you when you started, and you have helped me over the years. So it is wonderful to see how you're flourishing. Can I just say this really quickly?
Yes.
I still take into account don't touch it twice. So if I have a bill or a piece of mail that comes in, and if I do touch it twice, I promise you, I think of you. It's like Aldreama said, don't touch it twice. So I still use that. I do use a whole lot more, but that one has always stuck with me.
Wow. Oh, my goodness. That is so awesome. You know, sometimes you don't even remember the type of advice or that you've given, people over the years. And so that is awesome that you're still using that. I mean,
I use a lot. That one is an easy, practical one. Why don't you take care of it the first time? Why are you going to touch it twice?
Yes.
Plus 3 times. So that is a la Aldreama Harper. But anyway, I am very glad to be here.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much. And so I can tell you I have a lot of questions that I want to ask, but I'm going to just try to keep it concise and all that stuff, because it really isn't about me, it's about the listeners. And so, but the thing is, this is such a timely topic, when it comes to, things that's going on now and all that, So one of my questions would be, what actually prompted you to write this book, Holy Borrowers? What was it that you saw in the marketplace, or that need that you saw, and you thought, you know what, I need to write a book to help people out in this area?
Okay, and thanks for asking that. I'm going to go general, and then I'll get real specific with the book. Over the years, so I retired from banking. I'm not retired, but I retired from the banking industry April 2019 after 32 years. And over those years, really actually even going into banking, I realized, so I went to business school, I had an economic, all of that. I had a finance background in school, but it wasn't until I went into banking, and commercial banking is just the fancy word, not so fancy, but for dealing with businesses versus consumers, like you and me personally. And so when I went into commercial banking, and I went through this training program, and here's how we make our loans, here's how you should analyze. I was sitting there going, again, I went to business school and undergrad in economics. I was going, I didn't know this stuff. They didn't even teach this in college. And so it's always just blared out to me that it's nothing to do with intelligence, that we just don't know. And then, many communities, African-American people of color, may not get it, or people who didn't grow up, of all colors, people who didn't grow up, with the Wall Street Journal at their table. We really don't know. And so over the years, I used to do workshops at different churches, even, including our own church, for entrepreneurs. So small businesses, and just kind of, here's the 5 things, here's the way banks look at evaluating a loan request, and it's things we didn't know. So that was in general, and I've always had a passion for that. My book, Holy Borrowers, when it says equipping church leaders for building finance, that same issue pertains to churches, it pertains to church leaders, to pastors. It's still the same lack of knowledge, and that's across the board. That's churches. They're just not church. There's a whole lot of books on how to get people to give, or why we should give to the Lord, which are true. But there is nothing I saw that was written in plain English for pastors. Okay, when people give, how do you make decisions with these huge assets, your church building? And so I actually retired to do that. I also knew too many pastors, who, small and large churches, who had gone through foreclosure of their church building, and I knew a whole lot more who they didn't actually lose their church building, but boy, they lost a whole lot of sleep, stress, because they were having trouble making their bill, the payments, and, all of those kind of things. So I put it in. That's a long answer probably, but I put it in a book really because the Lord told me to. I have all this knowledge in my head, and it was, you need to put it down in writing in a way that people can understand it.
Oh, my gosh. I mean, you hit on so many things, especially when you said there was really nothing out there in terms of, churches and, what do you do with all of these assets? Because, there's people, and I'm trying to say it the right way, because there's a lot of people, out there that, and I'm sure you've heard it, well, what are they going to do with the money, and that's why I don't give to churches because of this, so many things. Exactly. And so that's why this book is definitely a welcoming project to our community, because I see so many instances where it's mishandled and and things like that, and I know you've seen it as well, and so I mean, this is I'm excited about the book. Now I will tell you that I've only been able to access your book. It's been on Rodney's desk, and he's been reading it, but I'm going to have to apparently buy my own copy, okay?
Well, he's like my husband. I can't read the book after him because he's written all over it.
Exactly.
What did the author write? What did you write?
Exactly. So I got to get my own copy and everything because he's, anyway. But so, yeah. But I did grab it off of his desk so that, of course I could, talk a little bit about it. But now, even before we get into, that, the book a little bit more, what are some things that you actually help your clients do? I'm in a position in retirement, which is good, that I'm not out trying to, I'll put it this way. I'm not charging these huge amounts of money and such, but I really do work primarily with churches and nonprofits, and I kind of do so on a selective basis because I actually am trying to act retired sometimes, and then I'm very active. Good luck with that.
Yeah, I know, and I'm very active in our church, of course, and and then I try to have a personal life. So. But that being said, I really do try to help. I really have realized I am, and I don't mean this any kind of way, I am gifted and trained in the area of finance. And I used to argue with the Lord quite a lot because I'm also a minister, and I try to explain to him like I wasn't the child that, well, Lord, here's what ministry looks like, here's what preaching looks like, and it doesn't involve a bank. And he kept sending me to, I even left banking in 2002 and came back to banking because I had, so it was just.
I remember you left, yes.
Exactly, and I went right back in. And so that being said, I really do help clients understand how to see things in ways they can understand it in plain English. I'll put it that way. And I'm a latent teacher. I love teaching more than anything. And so to really be able to explain, whether to pastors or individuals, not to be overwhelmed or intimidated is really the better word I'm looking for. And I had someone tell me a long time ago, if you don't understand it, then you probably ought not do it. And that meaning, if it's sounding overly complicated and someone's trying to use all these terms, tell them to break it down. Because even when we talk about a building loan, okay, well, most of us have a car loan or have had one in our lives. Some of us have a housing loan. So if you can put it in terms, or you talk about late payments, okay, lots of us have loaned money to somebody and then get paid back on time. So it's the same. And I tell people, and this is the truth, the smallest loan I've ever made when I was in banking, I think it was about $3,000. It wasn't more. I think it's $3,000 is the right number, and it was to help a gentleman get a piece of equipment for his carpet cleaning business. So $3,000. The largest loan I was ever involved with was $100 million. $100 million, and the same principles applied for both. And that so I help people understand, and it's not just about the bank. Here's what banks are looking for. So here's how, even if you never go to a bank, here's how you should understand your own finances. Here's how you should make decisions. Here's how, and especially for Christians, because then we intersect it with faith. And sometimes the Lord is saying, okay, I didn't tell you the truth. So where does faith come in? Yes, there's faith, but also what are some principles where I can leave myself a cushion? It's not living on the edge, those kind of things. So I really, again, work primarily with nonprofits and churches, but try to help them break it down so they can look at, there are a number of ways to make these decisions about finances, and I help them look at all of them, put it that way.
Oh, I love that. I love that. You also said something, when you mentioned about the small business owner borrowing, $3,000. So that kind of prompted, I wanted, and I've always wanted to ask this, with someone on the other side, which is your, positioning, because you've seen, both sides, of course, from the entrepreneur standpoint, as well as the church standpoint, as well as the bank, standpoint.
Right.
So when is it okay for a business to borrow money? Because I've always had the mindset that, I want my business to be, cash, I don't want to borrow money for my business and things like that.
Right.
So when is it okay, and is it okay for a business to borrow money?
Yeah, and it's going to be a very general question, and there's that every situation is going to be different. But in general,
absolutely,
there is a place for strategic debt. I would call it that way, strategic, and it's just like it would be similar to, there are some people who are I'm not going to be in debt for anything, and that's good. There's nothing wrong with that. But let's say a house or a building, if it was taking you too long to save up that type of money, there's one instance, for a large asset, and you could purchase it and then put it to use so that it actually will cash flow for you, that may be, again, it depends on the situation, but that's an example of where that really could be a great opportunity. Another one for small business owners in particular, if you sell on credit for whatever reason, and to be competitive, everybody wants their cash, but if you're giving people 30 days to pay you, in the meantime, or if you have to give them 60 days, in the meantime, you have to pay bills today or tomorrow, but you're not getting paid, and that's if they pay on time. And so there are a lot of lines of credit, and that people can use. Again, I'm saying this with caution, but a business credit card, they can use that to bridge those gaps when they have money that's going to come in, and you're pretty confident it's going to come in. But you need to pay bills now, and it's going to be repaid from what comes in. But it's not, and again, that's being careful. It's not overspending and getting something. I'm just going to, go into debt, and if you build it, they will come kind of thing. That's putting yourself in a lot of trouble because you don't have, you don't see, you don't have a plan, and you don't have something on the horizon where you actually do know what's coming in, barring something catastrophic. So so that's one. And then two, I alluded to it, you do need to have the cash to pay it back. And and over time, so whenever, I say whenever, as a banker, just being quite transparent, when I was younger, since we're talking to over 50s and I'm over 60 now, but when I was in my 20s, look, a wonderful thing. When I was in my 20s, I thought a credit card was magic. And so because I couldn't believe you could go into a store and come out with stuff and you didn't have to pay it. I just kept going, you mean, wait a minute, really? I can take this stereo home? And I don't know, I'll have to pay you anything? No, man. Oh, no, can I get that too? And so you're talking to someone who is, I say, recovered, and you always have to be careful. I can get into that in a minute. So you really do have to be careful of not confusing opportunities and strategy to bridge something temporarily with, I'm going to go spend it up and I'm going to pray and hope that the Lord will bless it. That's not the way to do it. That's not sound financial principles, even, I was going to say even for Christians, and maybe especially for Christians, since we have a witness.
Absolutely. I totally agree. And by the way, I was the same way about credit. I was like, oh, yeah, give me that card, let me get this. I did get a stereo, on credit, things like that. So, but, I think a lot of it is because we grew up in that era, when it was, and I want to say, for lack of better terms, we didn't know any better, right. Because I could, for me personally, I know I didn't manage it well. I didn't, I wasn't making, really good decisions. And, I was one of those people that would not have a plan, to pay it off. It's like, well, I'll figure it out, Oh, but I do have to pay this back. Oh, yeah, that's right, And
on time.
Exactly.
That's CP time. So let me give a free plug for an organization, if I could, that we just got involved with, and it's called D-Free, D like in dog, DFREE.org. And our church, Christ Community, just got involved with them, and it's founded by Dr. DeForest Soaries. And the long story short, and I think it's under mydfree.org. I think that's right. But I can tell you it's specifically for African Americans in how it was designed. And I know your audience is broad, so that doesn't mean no one else can come. That's not what it means. It does mean culturally, those are the images you see, because if we don't come up that way, those are the images you see, and even some of the mindsets of why do we spend how we spend. So it doesn't first deal with budgeting. And it's spiritually based, but it first deals with, I think it calls it address the mess, but it's like a 12-step. But it really is phenomenal. So I won't go into all of that, but we just got involved with them, and we have about 90 people going through at our church right now, and it is phenomenal. It's phenomenal. So, again, there are things out there to help us with. It's not as simple as saying just say no. Why are we spending? Why do we spend? Who are we trying to impress? All of those kind of things.
Yeah, and you make a very, very, very good point, because everything starts with mindset. I mean, when I begin to learn, my relationship with money and how I grew up, on one side, I had, one of my parents who was not good with money. And then on the other side, my other parent, she was like, I'm trying to save money here, and you keep spending it. So I had a very interesting, it was an interesting dynamic there, and so my relationship with money was really challenged. And so, and even, in marriage, Rodney is one who is really good with money. And I was kind of a latecomer, so because he was taught a little bit differently, and so definitely starting with the mindset and your relationship with money, your relationship with business. Why do you make those? Why have you made those type of choices? In the past, and what can you do now to change how you think about money? Because it all starts with mindset. And so,
it does.
So, so go ahead.
Oh, no, I was going to say, bring it full circle to where we started. And this is again, I'm married to a pastor. I love my husband, all of that. So there's no disrespect. That same pastors are human. That same mindset comes into the church. And
absolutely.
So the same ways we, might spend on a credit card, again, we're getting to assets. I can buy that building, or I can build that building, or I can expand, or I can, and, the big knock on pastors, we all heard it, all they care about is, money. That's not true, number one, in most cases. I'm saying
I agree.
I agree. But really what happens is, for pastors who get in, they call them back over their skis. I don't ski, but over their skis, they get in over their heads. There's a reason if you are in a church and all they're talking about is money. If that's true, it's not so they can get it. In most cases, it's because they got overextended, or they had a building program, and the bank, and I deal with this in the book, but the bank made a decision, and they got the loan. But it was based incorrectly, because banks can make mistakes too. It was based incorrectly on the campaign, the capital campaign that was going on. So you see pastors will have a 2-year capital campaign, and if they have a banker who doesn't know what they're doing, the banker will look at those finances and say, oh, good, you can afford this. Well, when the 2 years is over, then they're in trouble. So they'll say, okay, well, it's a 5-year capital campaign, or people pledged to give and people relied on those pledges, which is another mistake. People mean well, but it doesn't always occur. Life happens, and so all of a sudden those pledges don't come in. So all of those things, I get back to the word cushion. Whether you're in business as an entrepreneur. In our personal lives, and certainly for pastors, churches, any kind of business owner, it's learning to operate, within our means, but also with a cushion. Who knew COVID was happening? No one, but life happened. And so some kind of cushion so that we're not in over our heads.
Absolutely. Well, I got a few more questions, and I know you have to go, but I wanted to ask you, what are some mistakes that you see people make when it comes to the process of borrowing? And I know you named a few, but just to kind of help some of my entrepreneurs who's going to be listening, to the call, how can they be more prepared? Maybe that's what I'm asking.
No, it's a great question. Actually, this is a shameless one. I have a whole chapter, how to get ready before you're ready. And it's actually, I have a lot of entrepreneurs who are, because it's dealing with church, but it's the same principles again. Okay. It's not, a lot of people mistakenly think the bank is going to finance 100% of whatever the need is. So if I have an idea, let's say I want to, I'm buying a building, or even, I'm buying a piece of machinery. That $3,000, for the carpet cleaning, gentleman owns his own business, is thinking I need $3,000, or I need $5,000, or I need $25,000. I'm going to go to the bank and get it, and the bank is going to say, no, you need to put some cash down as well. And so people will one of the mistakes is going in and not having the cash saved up. That's a simple one. And I say simple. It's a big deal, but that's an easy one to think about, because then they want to have some kind of skin in the game. Not keeping good financial records is a huge one. And that's for business owners in particular. And so you have, Quicken these days, you have QuickBooks, but even with that, if, many entrepreneurs are visionary, most of them are, but they not all have a financial background. So if you don't have that, it does pay to have, even if it's a bookkeeper, somebody who really does know what they're doing, not just entering your data. Because when you go to the bank, the first thing they're going to do, they're going to pull a credit report, they're going to look at your financial statements, because the financial statements, the banks always, and any kind of lender, they're looking backward. They're not taking a bet. We're all excited about where God is doing. We're all excited about our vision. We're all excited about that. The banks don't get paid to be excited like that. They're looking at backwards. Have you shown that you make enough cash to pay all of your expenses on a consistent basis, to pay all of your expenses and still have enough left over to pay us back? And you have to, and usually it's a minimum of 2 years, and I'd say more likely 3 years. For companies that are just starting in business, they're thinking, okay, I do have cash, but I don't have a history. That's why I need the money. And not recognizing that banks, they will have to have that history, even for there's something called a Small Business Administration or SBA loans. Some banks will, where the SBA guarantees if something goes wrong, they'll pay the bank back a certain amount. But there are some banks, many banks, even with an SBA guarantee, that's too high a risk for them. So, and let me say this. Can I say this real quick on behalf of the bank?
Yeah.
People think, the banks are, banks don't get paid. What we don't realize is when you were taking what I call a bet, that's equity. Because that's a venture capital, that's your family member who believes in you. Because what happens if you're a part owner, you get the upside. The banks don't get the upside. They just get paid that interest rate. That's it. And we all have heard of banks that have gone out of business taking bets. So before we kind of knock the bank, they are paid, they're in business to really be less risky, I'll put it that way. And we take it personally because it is personal, but to them it's not always personal. We need to see some kind of history before we loan money. That's what they get paid to do. Yeah.
So anything you want to say about these PPP loans or anything like that? I mean, it was just something that kind of popped in my head.
You have anything else you want to say on that?
I just want to hear from someone that's on that side. I didn't get one. Like I was like, no, I'm not even going there. So, but I wanted to hear from someone experienced in that industry.
Yeah, and I will say this. I was out of banking before this happened, so I wasn't involved in making the decisions. However, I was involved in helping some organizations get PPP loans, and, again, nonprofit. And actually, I can say, I guess I'm allowed to say that our church got one and gave it back within the deadline because we were blessed we didn't need it. And so there was an honor system that was, you really were supposed to have needed it. But I think they were not only good, I think they were a phenomenal thing for the people who needed it, which is a lot of companies with, everyone staying home. It still is catastrophic. And, now obviously we're not even dealing with the deaths and such. People have lost their lives and family members, but from an economic, just straight business standpoint, it really did make the difference, from a financial standpoint for people being able to survive. So I think without them, if we can think about it, it would have been far, far, far worse because it did keep people employed and so on and so forth. I think I will say it did speak to the need to know your banker, not a bank.
Yes. Yes.
The haves and the have-nots were the people who, especially small business owners, they a lot of times will go into a branch, and nothing wrong with the people who work at the branch. I have friends who work in a bank branch. But most of the decisions for businesses were taken out of the branch years ago. And so when it came time to get the PPP loan and you were trying to deal with some of these bigger banks, you had to stand in line behind everybody else who actually knew a banker, and they were dealing with them. They were getting personal attention instead of, having to deal with some kind of online portal. And that's not just for the large businesses. That's the nonprofit I dealt with was not huge like that, but they had a relationship with a banker, and I worked with them, and they were one of the first ones to get a PPP loan.
Wow.
In fact, they got both of them, PPP 1 and PPP 2.
Yeah. And the only reason it kind of popped into my head only because I've, even heard of some people getting those loans who didn't even have businesses and didn't even, have, they didn't even have a business. They started something like an Etsy store or something like that just to get a loan, and things like that. So, and it's always when things like that come about, you're going to have people who take advantage of those opportunities in a not so good way, and there others who, because I've talked to other entrepreneurs who said, man, I mean, I couldn't even get in the door. I mean, I couldn't even get like $500, so there's all of that stuff that's going on, with that. But go ahead. I think you were going to say something.
No, and I absolutely agree with you, and that's where you get into, and again, I wasn't saying that about my church to go, because there are churches I know who needed it and got it, and they used it well, and God is blessing them. But it gets back to an integrity issue. It starts and ends with an integrity issue for those people, and we can, people can always be slick, and we can, and, you can get away with it seemingly, but that's just a character issue, and, they do it too. Well, that's a character issue. So it really depends on who you are and how you live your life. But in terms of the other people who couldn't get in the door, that really does get back to what can we learn for the next time. It really is, if you need to go to a smaller bank, and I'm not going to name banks because I have friends at all the banks, right. But if you have, your larger banks, if you don't know someone personally, let me back up. If they don't know you, it's not enough that you know them. If they don't know you, they don't know your business, and they're not there to help, then go to a community bank. We're here in Dallas. Every bank in the country, big and large, big and small, is here. Go to a small bank. You want to be able to have a relationship. And that is the most critical thing about and if you're too small and they don't have time for you, go find a bank where you are you're at least, you may not be the biggest fish, but at least you're a fish that they know and they value.
Exactly. And so just three things that I've learned from this conversation. As an entrepreneur, if you were in the position or you're in need of money and you want to go to a bank to borrow money, you need to at least have some good financial records. You should have some money, somewhere that can help you.
Skin in the game.
So skin in the game. And have a relationship with, someone at the bank, so that they, like you said, if they don't know you, they don't know your business. And so those are definitely some critical things. And it's not like, I know this is stuff that a lot of us who will be listening to this, may have heard before, but how many times have we heard something before and still not done it? And then it comes back to bite us, So
like in PPP, it came back to light. A lot of people, and when I say know someone at the bank, know someone who deals with businesses. Like you would want to ask them. You could even ask them, tell me about your PPP process. How did that work?
Right.
And if they tell you everybody went through a portal, and or how many did you get approved? You can interview the banks, and that's a good thing to. That's a good example because you had every bank in the country doing PPP, or not every bank, but these banks that were doing it. You'd really want to know. Well, we went through a portal. Did your portal collapse? Did you because you want to find somebody who specializes in whatever your size business is. I'll put it. I say small. It's big to us. Whatever I have a small business, but it's big to me.
Yes.
Whatever your size is, that's the size they specialize in.
Yeah. Well, last question. So, because I don't want to hold you. I know you got things you want to do, but last question or last two things. So, what exciting things do you have coming up, and how can people reach you?
So this is off of exciting. I'm amazed at some of the things the Lord is doing in terms of doors that he's opening. Like I joined the board of a missions organization. This totally off of finance, even though I'm on the finance committee, so I guess I can't say that either. But I am, if I had a twin, I would have been a missionary. And we're in, this dream from when we were together. So we, our church supports missionaries, and particularly on the continent of Africa. So, Ghana. So we have a relationship with two things. We have a relationship with churches in Ghana that we're developing. People. So that's exciting. I've been there 4 times now. So that, and then. Coming out of banking, who would have known that I'd be asked to be it's World Venture, which is a mission-sending organization. So I'm actually the first African-American woman to have joined that board in their history. So that's exciting. The best way to reach me is actually my website, and I have 2 businesses. So Holy Borrowers, which is my book. So Holy Borrowers, and that's with an S.com. And I'm doing Zoom workshops for churches. I'm thinking about maybe some in person strategically, but really working with pastors. So it's, buying the book, but really the book is important, but honestly, I really love talking to people. So doing workshops, so you can reach me for workshops and also purchase my book there. And then my other company is called Acceleration Advisors, and it's accelerationadvisors.com. So both of those would be.
Hi, this is Aldreama Harper, and thank you for listening to the podcast. I hope you got value for where you are in your entrepreneurial endeavor. And if you'd like to know more about how I can further serve you, simply go to CoachDreama.com. Again, that's CoachDreama.com. I look forward to hearing from you. Have an amazing day.